What if I cause collateral damage or hit a bystander when shooting in self-defense? All right. So let's imagine that the self-defense act itself is hypothetically perfectly clear. So there's a guy steps out of a doorway, stranger to you, no relationship, no previous animus, nothing going on. He's just a crazy person who wants to kill you. And he steps out of a doorway with a raised machete, and he's 10 feet away, and he's looking at you. You're there's no one behind you. You're the target, raises that machete. He's prepared to swing it at you. That's not a complicated tactical or legal problem, right? You just solve that problem. And maybe you solve it by drawing your concealed carry pistol and shooting him twice in the upper center chest. Um, and he falls over neutralized, and that fight is over. And let's pretend no one on the face of the earth is going to contest that was lawful self-defense. Unfortunately, one of those rounds overpenetrates, passes through the genuine attacker, and goes on and kills a bystander down the street. What are your legal liabilities for killing that bystander? So the way the doctrine would work here is it's a doctrine called transferred intent. Now, transferred intent most commonly applies in a negative sense. It creates legal liability for you, not you personally, for the person to whom it's being applied. And typically it goes like this. I intend to murder Joe. I have no justification for shooting Joe. I just don't like him. I've decided I want to kill him. It's an unlawful killing. It's simply straight up premeditated first-degree murder. And I encounter Joe on the street and I say, here's my opportunity. And I pull my pistol and I shoot Joe. And one of my bullets overpenetrates and travels down the street and hits and kills the bystander. Now, I didn't intend to murder the bystander. I've got nothing against the bystander. I didn't even know the bystander was there. But what the law would say is that my murderous intent towards Joe essentially attaches to that bullet and travels with that bullet. And then if I unintentionally kill some other person against whom I had no actual murderous intent, it's said that my murderous intent towards Joe transfers to that other person as well. And that becomes a second murder. So my bad intent transfers over. The same applies if we're talking about good intent, except it applies in a positive way. So I'm attacked by the guy with the machete. I have good, lawful intent when I fire those 2 rounds into him. And that good intent attaches to that bullet and travels with that bullet. And when the bullet that overpenetrates goes on and hits and kills the innocent bystander, there is no unlawful malicious intent attached to that bullet. It's a tragedy that bystander was killed, but under the doctrine of transferred intent, there ought be no criminal liability. Frankly, there ought be no civil liability either. Now, all of that works only if your shooting, if your use of force was non-reckless. So you're defending yourself in a reasonable, responsible way. You bring the gun up, you get the sights on the intended target, you fire the gun. There's no way for you to predict that a round's going to overpenetrate. I mean, we all know theoretically it can happen, but it doesn't happen in this instance because you're doing something reckless. You're operating the gun exactly the way you're supposed to operate the gun in self-defense, reasonable self-defense. But what if you're not defending yourself reasonably? What if you're defending yourself recklessly? Recklessness meaning you're knowingly creating an unjustified risk of death or serious bodily injury to other people. Say, for example, you don't bring the gun up and put the sights on the guy with the machete. You see the guy with the machete, you get scared, you whip out your gun, you cover your eyes in fear, and you just do a mag dump down the street. That's not a reasonable use of a gun in self-defense. And if those mag dump rounds end up hitting innocent bystanders, transferred intent does not work because your intent was not a good intent. It was not a reasonable intent. It was a reckless intent. And if you recklessly, if you knowingly create an unjustified risk of death to other people, as if you were drunk driving, for example, right? That's the classic example. You get drunk at a bar, you get behind the wheel to drive home. You're not trying to kill anybody. You don't want to hurt anybody. You just want to get home. But you know that if you're driving drunk, you're creating an unjustified risk of death to others. And then if you do hit someone on a crosswalk on the way home and kill them, that's a reckless killing. That's involuntary manslaughter. And involuntary manslaughter, obviously, cannot be lawful self-defense. So in the shooting context, you do that mag dump, you're firing recklessly, you unintentionally, but recklessly kill an innocent because you created that unjustified risk of death knowingly. That's just involuntary manslaughter. So transferred intent only works to relieve you of legal liability for the unintentional death of a bystander if you're defending yourself reasonably. If you're defending yourself recklessly, it's just the death of that bystander is just involuntary manslaughter.